Happy Friday. Today we're going to talk about percent composition, and I'll go through and explain it. But first, what I want you to do, I want one person in the class to record the mass of all the gum that's on the scale in the back of the room. Once that person's recorded the mass for everyone, they can pass out a piece of gum, including the wrapper, to each person in the room. Please chew the gum for a few minutes while I explain what percent composition is. Percent composition is how much of a compound is made up of a given element by mass. Here's the equation for percent composition. Percent composition is equal to the mass of the element. Now this is what you'll get from the periodic table. You multiply that by the number of atoms of that element. So if we were talking about H2O and we wanted to find out the percent composition of hydrogen in H2O, we would look at the periodic table and find the mass of hydrogen, which is 1.01. There are 2 atoms in H2O that are hydrogen, and then the total mass of the molecule. Now, you get this, it's 18.02 by adding up the mass of 2 hydrogens plus 1 oxygen. Then you multiply this number by 100, and putting this in your calculator, you would see that the mass of the percent composition of hydrogen is 11.2%. Now, since percents add up to 100, since this compound is only made up of hydrogen and oxygen, you could subtract this value, this percent of hydrogen, to get the percent of oxygen. You could figure out the percent of oxygen in this by subtracting the percent composition of hydrogen from 100. Since percents add up to 100, you would get that the percent composition of oxygen is 88.8%. You could also set up a calculation and check your work. So we would do the mass of oxygen, which is 16.0. There are just 1 oxygen atom in water, and again the mass of water is 18.02, and if we did this calculation, you would also get that it was 88.8%. Always good to check your work. All right, now for the fun part. We're going to figure out what percent of the gum is sugar. So after you've chewed it, carefully, without putting out too much saliva, spit out the gum in your gum wrapper and wrap it up and place it all on the scale. Now this is in Moodle also, and you won't be handing this in, but this is just kind of a fun exercise to practice percent composition. Initially you had the mass of all the gum, and that was recorded, and then the mass, you're going to subtract from that the mass of the gum after chewing. Now this won't be exact because there's some saliva in there, but this is just for practice. So what you can see is that the difference between the before chewing and after chewing is the mass of the sugar that was in the gum. And now to find the percent composition of sugar, what you're going to do is you're going to do the mass of the sugar over the total mass of the gum that you started out with times 100. And now we're just oversimplifying this, and this would be the percent of sugar. We're going to assume that the gum is made up of just sugar and gum, whatever gum is. So this is a way to see the percent of sugar in gum. Now here's some more examples of percent composition. Again, if we were looking at this molecule here, C2H60, we could find the total mass of the compound by adding up 2 carbons plus 6 hydrogens plus 1 oxygen from the periodic table, and doing this you would get 46.07. So the first step is that you want to find the mass of the molecule. And then to find the percent of each element, you would look at how many there are. So in carbon, there's 2 carbons. We'd multiply that by the mass, again, from the periodic table. The mass of carbon is 12.01, divided by the total mass of the compound, which is 46.07 times 100. We would do the same thing for hydrogen and oxygen, and then to check our answers, our percents should add up to 100. All right, we're going to break up into groups of 2. And what I'd like you to do is one person can go to California and mine for the krennerite, which is an ore that has a lot of gold in it. And then some of you can travel to Colorado and mine for calaverite. So what you're going to do, I'd like you to turn to your partner next to you, and one person find the percent of gold in krennerite, and the other person find the percent of gold in calaverite. And so what you're going to do, you're going to look for the mass of gold from the periodic table times the number of atoms of gold over the mass of the entire compound times 100. And so what miners do sometimes is that they would look for different ores and they would see which ore would be more beneficial financially for them to mine for. So work on this. This is practice. You can ask questions if you have any, and make sure you get an answer. We'll talk again about this on Monday. Once you've done that practice, what I'd like you to do is spend the rest of the period getting a good start on your homework that's due on Tuesday. It's in Moodle. It's the assignment right below the flip chart. It's called Molecular Mass Percent Composition. You can work on this, show your work. If you have any questions, send me an email. Have fun and happy Friday.